Welcome. Welcome. Welcome to Iowa's great race for governor, and welcome to the home of Gary and Shelley Pitts, a.k.a. also known as my mom and dad. Can we hear it for them? And can they stand up so everyone, not everyone here knows them, so almost everyone knows, but not everyone. My mom's back there, and where's my dad? Oh, well. Tonight, on the agenda in the hopper, we have questions on God, guns, gambling, drugs, much, much more. It's all on the agenda, so don't let anyone fool you. Politics are not boring. This fun and informational meet and greet with these gubernatorial candidates has one preeminent goal. Every single attendee here tonight, we should all be better voters when we leave. No more and be better. Who will be the next occupant of Terrace Hill? The governor's mansion. Who will be the future boss of our great Hawkeye state named Iowa? Ladies and gentlemen, Election Day 2026 will be upon us before we know it. Thank you for getting ready with us. I want to thank Steve Scheffler, the Iowa Faith and Freedom Board. So much work goes into it behind the scenes, so many years of organization. I also want to thank my wife, Kayla, just because I'm tough to be married to, and especially the last couple of weeks putting this together. We want to thank our event sponsors, Scott and Anita Doty, John and Julie Lepley, Barb and Craig Forney, the Pitts family, and Eric Weber has done the sound for us. He's doing the sound system tonight, so give them a thank you. We also would like to thank the various media outlets. Let's give them a round of applause. We have several here tonight. Most of all, thanks to all of you for coming, for caring, and for participating in this important process. I'll be reading the questions tonight, and the goal is to be impartial. As such, I won't be asking, gotcha follow-up questions or pointed questions. I'm asking the questions we all want to know. If they spin, you can figure it out. I'll simply allow the candidates to speak for themselves. We plan to cover a wide range of issues that are considered to be of interest to voters. The program format is as follows. The goal is that speaking time will be allotted equally. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to kind of address the crowd and introduce themselves and say carte blanche, whatever they want to say. After all the candidates have finished with this 5-minute introduction, then we'll rotate questions and answers in a manner that will aim to give 8 questions individually to each candidate, and we'll go around. The first 4 of these 8 total questions will be the same for each person. So they're dealing with the 4 questions that I think most people, everyone here is going to want to know. Pipeline, life, electability, and property taxes. Those are the first 4. They've had those a week ahead of time, so you get to see them on script and see, well thought out answers. Then we'll do 4 questions that are off script, that they don't know what they're going to be, and they'll be different. So with that said, we will roll the dice randomly to see who goes first, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves. But could the candidates please come up? Pipelines and property rights. The white-hot debate over the, what's that? Introduction. So this is Senator Mike Busolo, House Member Eddie Andrews, and former House Member Brad Sherman. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't we get the 5 minutes first?
Thank you. I'm nervous up here. Can you tell? I completely blew the, so 5-minute intros. Mr. Busolo, you go first.
Thanks, Jeff. And Gary, Shelley, thanks for welcoming us to your home. I feel a little bit like it's a Catholic Mass on Sunday. The front pews here are all empty still. So it's like St. Luke the Evangelist in Ankeny. I want to thank the Faith and Freedom Coalition, and you guys dialed up a great night. Earlier this week, I was a little worried about how dang hot it was going to be and if I was going to be in a sport coat or a polo or how we were going to handle the heat in the outdoors. I'm Mike Busolo. I grew up in Davenport, Iowa. Went to Davenport Central High School, the University of Iowa for an undergraduate and master's degree in business, Drake University for law school, and then started and moved to Ankeny and started 2 small businesses. I do real estate development and land investment. We build multifamily and single-family homes in places like Clear Lake, Dyersville, Mount Pleasant, Grinnell, Davenport. And I'm a state senator. I was elected to the state legislature in 2021, served in the Iowa House with Eddie and Bubba, and then moved. My first vote was to vote myself out of a job. We redistricted right away, and moved over to the state Senate in 2022. And I think getting elected in Ankeny when 2 Democrats were elected to the House seats that I represent, I know something about tough elections. And in 2026, as Steve said, we have a tough election ahead of us. Now, Rob Sand's the kind of guy who, when he shows up here or shows up in Waukon, Iowa, he drives into town in his F-150. But he also is the same guy who then drives back to Des Moines, gets into his $250,000 Mercedes, and drives private to the airport so he can fly private to Aspen. He is, as they say, a wolf in sheep's clothing. His first year as auditor, he spent more money than he took in. As auditor, he had a whistleblower reach out to him and say, hey, auditor, we think millions of dollars are being misspent in our courts. Court debt is going to the wrong places, including forsaking crime victims. He sent an email back, said, we'll be on it. And then he promptly did nothing for years. For years. As state auditor, he had schools reach out saying, we need help with our public school audits. Now, he wants to audit all these private schools, but when the public schools reached out and said, I need to help being audited or for the taxpayers, he said, no, I'm too busy. And most recently in Winterset, you've probably read about this, the scandal going on there, where there's supposedly money being misspent by an auditor and the county. And he said an audit would take 18 months. Well, you know what he said that? 18 months before the election. This is the kind of guy where actions speak louder than words. And that's the kind of guy we're going up against. And for every single thing we've done in the legislature over the past few years that Eddie and I and Brad, when he was there, supported, things like banning boys and girls bathrooms, things like banning boys and girls in sports, school choice, making illegal immigration illegal in Iowa, protecting our public safety officers, making rioting and blocking public streets illegal, protecting our cities from looting. He just kept saying all we were was mean, hurtful, and we shouldn't do it. When we cut income taxes, he said we can't afford it because he cares more about the state budget than he does about your budget. And we have a problem because right now we have a big election coming. I was born in 1982. I'm the youngest guy up here, I think. So I can't say I remember it. But in 1982, we elected Terry Branstad. That was 2 years after Carter got kicked out of the White House and Reagan had came in. Well, we're 2 years after Biden and Trump came in. What is the future of our state going to be? We have a huge choice to make. Is it going to be an Iowa first choice? Is it going to be a choice that moves our state forward and says, we still have 1 million people living in rural Iowa and we need to build those communities up, not try and tear them down, and it's not going to happen through government grants? Is it going to be a governor that recognizes economic opportunity and development, that does not believe, like Rob Sand does, that we should raise your sales tax and make it more expensive to live in Iowa? We have an opportunity with manufacturing jobs coming back to this country. We have an opportunity to say what is next for agriculture, to build up every town in Iowa through economic development, through recognizing the importance of agriculture, the importance of manufacturing, to build our state and to continue building our state into the powerhouse that it is. Because like Steve Scheffler said, the other guy has a very different vision of higher taxes, bigger government, and less freedom for families. You know, on election night or on caucus night in 2024, I was President Trump's attorney. Something had gone wrong. I was the attorney he hired. I was going to have to sue the Republican Party of Iowa to make sure we got it right. And the lesson that I've learned from President Trump time and time again, and the lesson that the three of us have, the lesson that we all need to take from tonight that goes into 2026, is we have to fight for what we stand for and what we believe in the state of Iowa that we want. Thank you so much for being here and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for to the Pitts family. Thank you. Every time we come here, we have a great time. Thank you for, I'm looking at all the people that I know. It is a wonderful evening. So my name is Eddie Andrews, and I want to be your next governor. You know, when the Trump team invited me to the White House to talk about, quote unquote, my vision for Iowa, I gave them a flip answer, the first answer. They said, why do you want to be governor? I said, I want to be the hype man for Iowa. And what I meant by that is, you know, the fifth word in the Bible is create. We can be so creative with all the solutions that the resources that we have in Iowa. We have a great future ahead. But before I talk about any of that, I just want to introduce myself and just tell a little bit about myself. One of the things that I learned in the legislature is that, yes, I do want to know your positions, but I also want to see what makes you tick. My biggest title is husband and father. I've been married. Yes, don't let the lack of gray hair fool you, but I have been married 39 years to my high school sweetheart. We got married as teenagers. We have 2 wonderful daughters. One is getting married next month. She couldn't wait, apparently, to not be in the middle of a campaign. And one got married last year to a wonderful man. We adopted a boy. Unfortunately, we lost him 6 years ago, which is really the cause of me even getting in politics, after seeing how all the holes that we have in our mental health care system. We also have a number of family members who aren't family. There's no DNA, but you can't tell them that I'm not their dad or their granddude, as they call me. So I went to the University of Iowa, got an engineering degree, did some time at the Iowa State as well, and got some religious training. I am also a bilingual minister. I've co-pastored a Hispanic congregation for 14 years. My real job is I am a tech entrepreneur. We started a foundation called Mentoromics, which initially took just troubled kids and kids at risk, and taught them not just coding, but entrepreneur skills and life skills. And so that will tell you just a little bit about the community that I love and the work that I've been doing. Boy, I forgot to start my time, so I think I've got 5 minutes left, right? Okay. So let me just get to why I'm here. I was elected in the toughest House seat at the State House for a Republican. I wasn't supposed to win the first time. I was outspent 6-1. I was facing an incumbent. I had no name recognition. And I said, I think this is a good time to run. I prayed about it, and God said yes, and Eddie said go. The second one, after redistricting, wasn't supposed to win that one. I had won by 485 votes, and they took 600 in redistricting. And I said, let's go. And we did it again with God's help. The third one, they threw in a Republican to run as an independent, and we won again. Why is that important? Because all of those victories I didn't let go to waste. I led on most of the important issues. I led on parental rights. That was my bill. I led on Save Our Girls Sports. I led on the pipeline issue. I've spent 43 different events working with farmers, working with landowners. I led on life. I helped garner votes. And this is in the toughest district, because when we have the opportunity, it's our time to say go. And I think one more thing I want to say, my colleagues, and you have to blame them, if you ask anybody down at the State House who the hardest working guy is at the State House, there's several names that come up, and mine comes up quite a bit, because I take this job seriously. And I want to take that same enthusiasm, that same hard work to the governor's mansion at Terrace Hill and make sure that we keep a good, solid conservative with the backbone at Terrace Hill. Thank you. God bless.
Well, my name is Brad Sherman, and I'm running for governor as well. I plan on being the next governor of Iowa, just like these guys do. We will see how that turns out. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll hit a few points. I grew up in Southeast Missouri, and my my dad had an excavating company, and we did a lot of drainage and farm improvement work. I was driving dozers when most kids were playing with Tonka toys and pushing. I was 12 years old. My dad had me on a D8 Cat, and I was pushing the scrapers, to load them. That was my job. Most fun a kid could ever have. We had drag lines as well. We did a lot of drainage work. There was a real swampy area where I grew up, and we dug ditches, mainly drainage ditches, to keep the swamp and turn it into farmland, and keeping those ditches clean, because swamps can reappear pretty quickly if you don't keep the drainage going. And so I'm just telling you this to let you know that I literally have swamp draining experience, and I want you to know that. So it's a very important point, and swamps will reappear very, very quickly if you don't keep a watch on them. I'm telling you that. So, I met my wife on August 14th, 1974. She's sitting right over there, Carol. August 15th, 1974. That's my wife. She's a tremendous asset to our campaign. And we got married 5 months later. Today's actually her birthday. Happy birthday to my wife. And so you can do the math. We got married in 1975. You can do the math on that one. But nevertheless, I did several things growing up. I worked on the riverboat up and down the Mississippi, and put up prefabricated steel buildings, commercial steel buildings. Then I was a heavy equipment mechanic, and we went into ministry training. And when we were ordained as ministers, we moved to Iowa shortly thereafter and started a church at the University of Iowa. And we've been pastoring there for 44 years now, and still pastoring currently. And when I moved to Iowa in 1981, that's when my eyes were opened. I saw Marxism, socialism, all these types of things being taught to our students. The students we were ministering to had to be shepherded through that, because they had a lot of challenges with the professors they were being confronting. So I took it upon myself at that time to begin learning all I could about the founding principles of America. Where did our freedoms come from, and how do we maintain our freedoms? Because I saw them slipping away, all that time ago. And so that's been my heartbeat now for 44 years. And I've been involved in politics most of that time. I was just talking with Steve Scheffler. We met each other back in the Pat Robertson campaign, whatever year that was. And so I've helped with many different campaigns, since then. And while being a pastor during those 44 years, I've done the seminars all around the state teaching the founding principles of America, because we must restore those things to our population. I've also done some home building, done some real estate development, started the Informed Choices, was a co-founder of Informed Choices Medical Clinics, and was a board chair and president of that for 10 years. So very strong on the pro-life issue. I'm a hobby gunsmith, support guns and the Second Amendment and all that. So, but when I saw our freedoms being taken, it really gripped me, and I've made that my goal. The slogan for our campaign is this: restoring the foundations of freedom. That's not just a cool phrase we came up with, we thought would be cool. That's been my heartbeat for 44 years. And we have to get those principles back into our government. We're celebrating 250 years of our nation right now. And our Declaration of Independence makes one thing very clear. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these rights are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Among those things, we have the philosophy and the purpose of the American form of government. The American form of government says this. This didn't come from a sermon or a Bible study. It comes from the Declaration of Independence, the birth certificate of our nation, and it tells us that rights come from God, not government, and the purpose of government is to protect those rights. And we've got to get God back into our public areas, into our public schools. We've got to get God back into our government, and I've been fighting. I fought along some hard battles on that, and I've seen the lack of interest in that. But we're not going to stop pushing. God's coming back to government in Iowa. I can just tell you that. Now, so. There's several bills I sponsored when I was in the House that would have gone that way. But let me just say this. George Mason, father of the Bill of Rights, said, if free people do not examine their liberties and how they were obtained, they risk losing these rights. And so we're on the verge of losing these rights. And I was in the Capitol the other day, and I don't know if I can remember this quote or not. I'm going to try. Carol's probably saying, you sure you know this quote? But we were in the U.S. Capitol the other day, and I saw a quote, and it said, "The greatest dangers to freedom exist in insidious encroachments by men of zeal, well-meaning but without understanding." And if we don't have the understanding, we can do all what we think is the right thing, but we end up making government bigger no matter what. Because we got to realize that the true government is in the people. Thomas Jefferson said the true correction for the abuses of the Constitution is to educate the people. And so we have to educate our population with these things and educate our schools. You know, that whole principle that rights come from God and not government, and the purpose of government is to protect those rights. If that principle alone was instilled into the children of our school systems, that would change everything right there. That would be huge. We just had that in there. And I'm grateful for the legislature this past session who passed a bill that said that the students to graduate high school have to pass the citizenship test. So I'm really happy about that one. Now, you know, there's a lot more I could tell you, and I don't know where I'm at on time. Let me just close and just by mentioning this little booklet. Where are we on time? You're about it. I'm about it? Okay. Well, I've grabbed this booklet back there. It tells you more about what I believe, some key issues. I wrote this 12, 15 years ago when I didn't think I was going to run for office. I've got 4 promises I've been making. I'd love to tell you those, but I'm out of time. Maybe we'll get to them later. Thank you very much.
Thanks to all of you for being respectful of time, for sure. So we'll start the round of questioning. We'll start with Mike on the first one, and then I'll start to stagger it after that. So then the next question, I'll start with Eddie, and then the next one with Brad. And so keep your answers to 1 to 2 minutes if you can. Pipeline, and these are big questions.
Two pastors?
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit's going to be here.
And the lawyer. Thank you.
It's getting deep.
Pipelines and property rights. The white-hot debate over the proposed CO2 pipeline and the potential use of eminent domain for private gain has become one of the most intense issues in Iowa. If you were governor today, what specific solution or legislative approach would you champion to protect private property rights while addressing this controversy?
So this past year was my first year as Commerce Chair in the Iowa Senate. We moved a bill out with full unanimous Republican support that protected property rights and, importantly, protected property rights for all landowner types. So it was not and all project types. So it was not just one type of project. It said we need to protect all projects. We need to protect all types of landowners. We moved that out, moved it to the Senate floor. On the Senate floor, we added that bill and included a ending of eminent domain for CO2 pipelines. That bill received 22 Republican votes, but did not pass. And what I have told Speaker Grassley and, as President Trump called him the other day, Majority Leader-elect Bobby Kaufman, I think he gave him a promotion without the approval of the caucus. You know, I've told them I want to be the first one at the table because whether it was as governor or next year, and I think it's too important to wait till we're governor, we have to do something to protect property rights in Iowa. My bill and the proposal, I think, and the approach we need to take is to protect all. Because today, the issue is a pipeline. In 2016, the issue is the Dakota Access Pipeline. But what we do know is that transmission lines are going to be the real bear that are coming to be coming through our land, right? There's more data centers all around us, right here in West Des Moines area, and all throughout Iowa. And they've got to get power to those transmission lines or to those data centers. And those power transmission lines are going through people's land. We have to protect all property rights. We have to put in place protections so that when land, even through a voluntary easement, has gone through, the soil gets restored, the farmer gets their crops back, and we have to make sure that we have a process that allows for avoiding the use of eminent domain altogether, which my bill did. 22 other states have a process so that you can go around the original proposed path so that you don't have to use eminent domain whatsoever. Has to be a voluntary easement only. It's common sense to avoid the use of eminent domain, and we don't do enough to protect property rights today. That bill, that approach, and what we need to do and address it next session is to protect property rights for all landowner types.
Okay, so I'm going to differ a little bit from my colleague. With all due respect, I think if we ask the landowners who the person up here who has been with them from the beginning, they're going to say Eddie Andrews. There's a rumor going around that I take a lot of pictures. A lot of selfies. It's not a rumor. And we chuckle at my selfies, right? But one thing that selfies do is they document. And I was just glancing the other day, 43 different events, 43, that I, Eddie Andrews, has stood side by side with the farmers, landowners at their events, not just at the Capitol, but all around Iowa. It's been me from the beginning. This is not something that, as even some people in my district, I live in Johnston, and people are like, Eddie, I'm just kind of curious, you're spending a lot of time there's not a lot of farmland in Johnston. And I said, look, it's the principle. As my colleague said, we're going to spend a lot of time on the Declaration of Independence. We're just celebrated 249 years, right? And that phrase, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, includes property. There are volumes written on it, right? It's how to say property without saying property. And as the southern states would have used property as slaves as property. So they couldn't say property. They had to say another way. And it is our responsibility to protect the rights and the land of the landowners and the farmers. They only just want to be left alone. They just don't want to sell. And it's our job to make sure that that doesn't happen. There's a saying that says, you can do this and you can do this, but in this case, you can't be, I don't think we can just afford to be ambiguous. We have to 100% protect the landowner rights. Eminent domain abuse has zero place in Iowa, and as governor, I will make sure that happens. I will solve that on day one.
I'm reminded of a story. I'll tell you a little story. I was talking to Mike Huckabee. I called him up, and he's a good friend. I helped him in his presidential campaign. I told him I was going to run for governor. And we were talking about President Trump and why it is that people like President Trump. And he said, well, you go out in farm country someplace, and you go into a little cafe in a small town, and there's 4 farmers sitting around a table. They're nursing a cup of coffee. They lean in real quietly to one another, and they whisper something, and they lean back, and they start nodding their heads. Yeah. And he said, what they just said quietly, Trump says out loud. And so I'm going to say something out loud here, and that is that CO2 doesn't hurt our atmosphere. That's a green scam. And we've been intimidated into giving in to this whole green scam thing long enough. Now, as far as the carbon capture pipeline and eminent domain, a private company who's not a common carrier for a product that's not a public utility should never get eminent domain, ever. Now, I differ a little bit with Mike as well on that one because I was fighting in the legislature. In fact, I asked Governor Reynolds a very pointed question back in 23, the first week of the session in 23, about what we could do to protect these people's property rights, because I'd just come from a hearing and I saw people in tears about their property rights being trampled on by Summit Carbon Solutions and some of the others. I asked her, so what can we do to protect these property rights? And it was just a blank stare with crickets. And finally it was, well, we can't change the rules in the middle of the game because these companies have already spent a lot of money on this. Now, I'm not here to beat up Governor Reynolds. I'm just saying we differ on that issue. But the point is, that same attitude was expressed in her veto of this bill. And the bill would have, in several of the senators that stood against the amendment and made sure that bill passed through the Senate have endorsed my campaign. So anyway, I'm just telling you, and there's legislation. Now, the question was actually about what legislation could we do, and I tell you, we need to make legislation that makes it very clear where eminent domain can be used and where it can't be used. Charlie Thompson filed 6 bills on this. All of them should have been passed, but they weren't, and so we need to get back to that. We probably should have more boards of more people on the commission instead of just 3 people, because it's harder to corrupt 5 people than it is 3. These are just some of the things that really need to be done with the Iowa Utility Commission. And so these things have to be changed. This is part of the swamp I'm talking about. And corruption happens, folks, and I've seen a lot of money change hands that short time I was in the House. And I'm not saying it changed hands illegally, but it sure looks to me like it sure influences the way that people take positions on issues. So I'm not going to be afraid to say it, and I'm going to say it out loud, but those are some of the things that we have to do to make sure we protect property rights.
Now we'll start with Eddie. Life. The heartbeat bill, which prohibits abortionists from killing unborn babies once a heartbeat is detectable, has now been the law in Iowa for a year. That's huge progress. Thank you all for voting for that. If elected, what's your vision for further progress to further protect innocent unborn human beings? And should Iowans expect you to push for a life at conception?
Thank you. I appreciate all these questions because these are questions. Every last one of these first four, we don't know what the next four are issues that I've actually led on. I've worked with our life agencies, our life organizations, because as a minister, as a man of faith, and really don't even have to be a minister, just a person of faith, with common sense, we understand that life begins at conception. And every life is precious. We're all made in God's image. And it's our job to protect the most vulnerable. And that's not just at conception, but all the way from conception to natural life. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but I've been asked to be on one of the boards of one of the life organizations. And they only do that, they would only ask me to do that if they know my stance and know my reason and know that I'm unshakable on this. I do believe that we have to go further. The majority of the abortions now are done through the abortion pill. And that's what I believe we need to address, the very next thing. And as a black man, let me just say this. Knowing what we know about Margaret Sanger and the evil that this woman exuded, did you know that Planned Parenthood's original name was the Negro Project? So I am glad. I celebrate the closures of evil court Planned Parenthood facilities that kill babies. And I will push for more as the leader of this state, use that bully pulpit to not only restrict them, but also to change hearts. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was happy to be able to vote on the heartbeat bill and see that get passed. And, there's more work that needs to be done. It was a good bill. It's a good step forward. But there is more work that needs to be done. I believe also life begins at conception. Roe v. Wade was turned over recently, and I'm certainly happy that it was turned over. But then it was pushed back to the states. And based on the Declaration of Independence, I don't think it should be pushed back to the states. It should be a national law to protect life, period. That's where it should be. That's the right place for it. But it is what it is. We're going to have to fight it on the state level right now. But when you stop and think about state level, how can life have value here, and then you step across this line and it doesn't have value? Why is it? If it's a person, then you can't kill a person here, and then it's okay to not to kill them over here, and it's okay to kill them here. So that's the real question here that we're dealing with life. Is this a person in the womb? If it is, then we need to protect life, and it goes across state lines. Otherwise, it's just an arbitrary line on a map. Now let's think about when do we protect life in the womb? Is that a person in the womb? Well, 80% of Americans believe it is a person in the womb because 80% of Americans are opposed to abortion, late term abortion. So they've said by that 80% position, yes, that's a person. So now we have to decide, okay, where do you draw the line on when it becomes a person in the womb? And that line, just like an arbitrary line on the map, is an arbitrary line in time. And it's just somebody's opinion against somebody else's opinion. So we have to go to the highest authority there is on this, and that's God and His Word. And in Jeremiah 1:5 tells us that before we were formed in the womb, God knew us. So life begins at conception. So we can't have arbitrary lines. We have to keep working to get back to life and conception and protect those rights that belong to that person before they're born, when they're conceived, all the way to when they're not. So that's my position on life. It's really pretty simple logic when you stop and think about it. We're just going to have to answer that question: is that a person or not? And God says yes, it is. In fact, I made this argument on the floor of the House when we were debating the heartbeat bill, and the Democrat leader called point of order on me because he didn't like the fact that I was quoting a scripture. I think it made him too uncomfortable, but anyway.
That's probably true, actually. You know, I wear this a bracelet, leather bracelet, and on the inside of it says "Daddy of an Angel." And my wife and I unfortunately lost a baby, and haven't been lucky since. So we know the value of life, you know, personally. And I was proud to vote for the heartbeat bill. And, you know, the mornings leading up to that vote, I had protesters out on my lawn in Ankeny at my house. 6 a.m., my neighbors came over and the kids said, "Can I escort them with squirt guns next time?" I said, "Hell yes." And my neighbors also said, it was 6 a.m. in the summertime, if y'all remember. It was a year ago, a couple of days ago. And my neighbor said, Mike, if you needed a wake-up call that bad, you could have just let us know. I mean, they were banging on pots and pans. And Bubba and Maria, who I think just stepped out, they had protesters at their house. I mean, that wasn't uncommon. And voting for that bill, you know, I think what we can't forget is how many lives have been protected in that year. You know, Governor Reynolds tweeted out a picture, but just thousands of lives have been protected. And we need to continue. You know, this year I was proud to vote for the Baby Olivia bill that talks about when life begins and teaches kids about science around when that life begins. And we need to continue to take steps to protect life and defund Planned Parenthood from the evil that they commit in this state. But the media is here tonight, and I think about every Republican event I go to, and as Steve Scheffler said earlier, you get a life question. You got 3 pro-life candidates up here. You know, the question that's not being asked is of Rob Sand, who on the anniversary of the heartbeat bill talked about expanding abortion rights in our state. And there is no line there that exists for Rob Sand, because if Rob Sand were governor, and he said this isn't my words, this is what he put out, he would use every power of that office to expand the rights to kill babies. My emphasis on the end. That's what he wants to do. Is that 36 weeks? Is that 39? Is it like the governor of Virginia before Youngkin, who even after birth? Where does that line exist? It's not a question getting asked of Rob Sand. These are 3 pro-life candidates. We will have a pro-life governor next if it's a Republican. We will have a pro-abortion governor if Rob Sand gets elected.
Electability and differentiation. Many expect a crowded and competitive. It's already crowded and competitive, but it could even get more. Who knows? But it should be competitive for sure. Republican primary in 2026. What sets each of you apart from the rest of the GOP field? What's the one defining quality or conviction that makes you different from your peers? And separately, why would you be the best choice to beat Rob Centerfold Sand or whoever the left puts forward?
Yeah, don't remind us. Do not remind us of the Centerfold.
All right. So, you know, we like to talk about first. I'm going to say that one word is first. I was the first legislator in 2024 to endorse President Trump. That sets me apart. And I asked Bobby Kaufman about that. I said, I knew I was near the front. He said, yeah, you were the first one. And he goes, I'll back you up in the media on that. And so I was in first in 24. And I'll tell you the reason that was in my mind. There were several reasons, but the first one that popped in my mind was the election was stolen from Donald Trump. And so you have a hard time just saying that you can support election integrity if you're not going to get behind the man who's rightly should be president because he was cheated on, taken away from him. So that was first. And then I was also the first person to jump in the race. I jumped into this race before Governor Reynolds said that she wasn't running. And this wasn't because I had a vendetta against her. In fact, I called Governor Reynolds in November of last year, and I said, you know, it's a little awkward for me because I don't know your plans for sure, but I'm going to tell you right now, I've prayed about this, and I've never been more confident about anything I've prayed about in my life. In 50 years of walking with the Lord, I can tell you this is the most confident I've ever been. And I said, but we've prayed about it, and so I'm going to have to run for governor. And she said, well, you should run. And she didn't tell me whether she was or not. But I think that speaks to confidence and clarity and purpose. I think that differentiates me. So first is and then that's just an important aspect. Now, as far as Rob Sand goes, you know, Iowa has been moving and trending red and conservative and constitutional conservative now for a few years. And why is that? Because Republicans stand firm on their convictions. They don't run to the middle. They don't compromise. They don't worry. They stand firm and say, this is what we believe. People recognize that kind of conviction, and they want to get behind that. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to stand firm, and we're going to keep Iowa moving forward. We're going to keep becoming more constitutional and conservative in our values. And Rob Sand has just been running to the middle. That's all he's been doing. And so when we do that, it's going to make a difference. And then, of course, the final thought on Rob Sand is that I just don't think Iowa will build their house on the sand. Do you? So anyway.
So I was elected originally in Ankeny, and when I was elected, it was 2 Democrats that were in my House seats, and I was the only senator of either party who got elected with 2 members of the opposite party making up those House seats. And I did it the year after we voted to protect girls' sports, the year after we voted to protect girls' bathrooms, and the year after we voted to end the horrific transgender surgeries on youths. And I was able to do it in a district because I worked hard, I listened, and I stood on my principles. Rob Sand he already has $7 million of his in-laws' money. Lord knows how much more is coming. My dad always told me, my dad's not known for his quips, but this is a good one that stuck with me. He said, Michael, if you marry for money, you're going to earn every cent. He worked at John Deere for 42 years. He wasn't a pastor, so he wasn't great at the quips, but you know, something like that you don't forget. And so you wonder what Rob's going to do for that money. And what we need is somebody who can communicate in an accessible way to voters all across this state, from eastern and southeastern Iowa all the way to northwest Iowa, the vision that we have for our state. Because we're at a turning point. For the first time in anyone's life here, Brazil will produce more corn and more soybeans than the United States at a lower cost than any farmers producing it in Iowa or Illinois or anywhere in the upper Midwest. We have manufacturing jobs coming back to this country for the first time in my lifetime because of President Trump and him making sure that fair trade is free trade, or free trade is fair trade. We have an opportunity for a golden age in Iowa. And we need a governor who's going to put Iowa first, Iowa always first, and can take that message across the state and talk about how we're going to build the economy, how we're going to build jobs, how we're going to build rural communities, and how we're going to do it standing on conservative principles. Because make no mistake, Rob's going to show up in town in his F-150. But he is a rich Des Moines liberal driving that Mercedes-Benz to the private airport. And that's why he wants to raise sales taxes. He opposes the income tax going down. He believes bigger government is better government. And will work with every inch of his being to undo the conservative actions we've taken on school choice through the Department of Education, for life through the Department of Health and Human Services, and every other action we've taken to protect families and freedom in this state. We have to communicate the message. We have to tell the truth. And for 4 years I've been in the legislature, I have taken the fight and told the truth about Rob Sand, and I'm ready to do it on my campaign trail.
Okay, so I'm just going to be the John of the, if you know the, as the pastor knows, the book of John. John just took the parts that Matthew, Mark, and Luke didn't say. So while I agree with my colleagues, let me just throw one more thing in there that they didn't say. I'm the only guy who's won 3 times in a blue/barely purple district. I've already mentioned I was outspent 6-1 and won. Why? Because we worked our derriere off. We prayed, we fasted, we knocked doors. We had the best team. You know, I had a minister who called me and just made sure it says, Eddie, make sure you have prayer warriors on your team. Make sure you have fasters on your team. Make sure you're praying every single day to make sure you are listening to the voice above. And I said, yes, sir, we already have that. They said, just checking. Each time we won, it was a shock to everyone but us. And it does something a little bit to your psyche when they're like, oh my goodness, you won, you pulled it off. I'm like, of course we did. And we didn't know we were the only ones not shocked, right? And as they've mentioned, yes, Rob Sand is, I won't say everything because the news media is here, but his marketing is to the middle. And so we have to have someone who can counteract that, who has a proven record of winning in the middle while being among the most conservative people and bringing people with him. Every single year, we have grown the Republicans who vote for us. Every single year, we have spent time and grown the number of people who become conservatives. And I got to tell you, yes, Iowa has a supermajority in both chambers, but it's not always that easy. Let me give you a scary stat. There are 3 states who have a supermajority: Republican House, supermajority Republican Senate, and they took their eye off the wheel and have a Democrat governor. Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina. There's 2 other states who there's not a supermajority, but it's the same thing. And the point is, you have to begin, like Stephen Covey, the author, said, you have to begin with the end in mind. Who is the best person on November of 2026 to beat the Democrat? And I think I'm that guy. I've got a proven record to say that. Like I said, the only one to win not once, not twice, but 3 times, and make that more conservative each time. Thank you. Pretty clear.
Real quick, break from the action. If anyone, we're not going to take a break in the program, but if anyone does need to use the restroom, there's a Kaibo on the back side of the house there. You can just walk around and just feel free to go.
It's not the bushes.
Iowa property taxes. Does Iowa need...
Not the sandbox.
Does Iowa need a new property tax system? Do we want tweaks to the current system? Or should we eliminate the system entirely? What should Iowa do in regards to property tax legislation?
Over the past 10 years, local government has increased spending by 110%. Right now, in Iowa, property tax revenues outpace income tax revenues that the state takes in. Right? We're paying more to local governments, and in Polk County, I think I elect 6 different boards to raise my property taxes. The fact of the matter is that property taxes are too dang high, and we have to reduce property taxes across the board. We have some of the highest commercial and industrial property taxes in the nation, bar none. We have some of the highest residential property taxes in the nation, bar none. In Ankeny, Iowa, there's a child care center that last year paid $91,000 a year in commercial property tax. This year, they're going to pay $105,000 in commercial property tax. That $14,000 doesn't come out of thin air. Right? It doesn't come and just show up in the business owner's pocket who's trying to provide childcare for Ankeny and they're full. It means that they're going to have to charge higher rates to families who are looking for childcare for their kids. It's a raise that they can't give to a teacher to retain a teacher, or it's something that's going to have to come out of the line of that business owner who took risk to build there in the first place. The property taxes as a whole are not just a drag on families, they're a drag on our economy. And we can't wait till one of us becomes governor to address it. In my opinion, we need to address it next session. But let me tell you something I find interesting. There's no state in the nation, not one, not even Florida, who has eliminated residential property taxes. Now we know, all of us know that local property taxes play an important part in funding public safety and funding infrastructure and growth. But we also know that a residential property tax is a tax on an unrealized gain. It's a hypothetical tax on a house that they say your house is worth more. In fact, I got my assessment the other day. I thought about putting a sign in the front yard, because if we can get that for it, I mean, hey, maybe I need to move. We can't just tinker with the system. We can't change the system. They just need to go down. And my team and I'm an accountant, so numbers matter to me. We are working on a plan to eliminate residential property taxes within a decade.
I love this question. You know why? You can probably guess, because I've led on this issue. Everywhere I go, we were in Plymouth County, we were in Jackson County, we were in Dubuque County recently, and everywhere I went, they said, "Oh yeah, I've heard you. You're the guy that's always talking about the property taxes that we need to reform and get rid of them and start over." I'm like, "That's me." And whether you've heard me on Simon Conway, whether you've heard me on, listen to Oliver's podcast, or the point is, we can't afford to rent our property even when we pay for our homes. The current system allows us to rent forever on land that we actually own. Think about that. Yeah. If you can find it, get it. So we've been talking about a number of issues. Now, I'm going to throw a name in there. They did not endorse, they cannot endorse, but they have approved that when we make statements about them, that we met with a number of organizations, including Iowans for Tax Relief. Those are the tax watchdogs of the state. And I think their statement was, we are excited about Eddie Andrews' plans. Okay, it can't endorse it, but the point is that we've looked at the numbers work, and I'm kind of a go big or go home kind of person. I don't like the premise. I reject the premise that we should rent our homes forever. I don't like the premise that everything should be based upon property. And in my plan, we just believe that we should fully eliminate them, destroy them, and start all over from scratch. Absolutely. And there are ways that you can do this while maintaining public services, public safety. There's a couple things that I should point out, just so everyone is clear. The state does not collect property taxes. Those are city, county, and schools. People forget that schools are a taxing authority. And so my plan would involve restructuring that entire formula. There's only like 3 people, and I know this, I only say this in half jest, that fully understand the very complicated school funding formula. It's absolutely a mess. We need to restructure that, simplify that, and make property taxes a thing of the past. Thank you.
Well, I too have been saying, I think the first time I said this, there was a city official in the room when I said it, that we shouldn't have property taxes on our homes, and he looked at me like I was from a different planet, because I've been saying this for many, many years. We work all of our lives to pay off our mortgage, and then we have to end up renting our home from the government, and that's just not right. So I agree with these guys on that point. And so but here's the thing, if we don't have some real plans, and I too have been crunching some numbers on a plan, and but if these numbers won't work, it's just political rhetoric. So I'm concerned about, I know the county supervisors. We've got my county supervisor sitting right here, and she knows how important it is. Our county has a hard time making ends meet, and so we have to do some serious auditing first. It's hard to figure out the answer to a problem if you don't know what the problem is yet. And so until we do some serious auditing, we're not going to know what can be cut and what should be cut. And I'm going to, without apology, I'm going to say that I believe Abby Moss here will do a good job as a state auditor, because if we had and she's running for that office, state auditor, because if we had a real auditor, we wouldn't need Doge, would we? And so I will just put that in your pipe and smoke it, for the situation with Rob Sand. But nevertheless, we have to find out where the waste is, and there is a lot of waste. And I'll ask you to just go talk to Abby after the meeting and find out, and she'll tell you a couple of really good examples. And one of her lines, I'm going to steal it from her right now. It says, "People lie, but numbers don't." And so that's what we've got to do first, is we got to do some serious auditing. It won't matter what we do in the legislature. We'll end up making government bigger. We have some unintended consequences right now from legislation that was passed because we had unfunded mandates that went down to the counties. And so they ended up having a really hard way to go because of it. So this has to be thought out carefully. But I'll tell you the thing that I think we can do, and I'm still looking into this, but I think for seniors, when you get to age 65, your primary residence could be property tax free if you've lived in Iowa for 10 years, and you put some skin in the game. Because if you don't live in Iowa for 10 years, we just have people coming in here to take advantage of it, and that wouldn't work. So you have to live here 10 years. So that's going to help Iowa maintain its population, because we have a serious problem with the Iowa population dwindling. I talked to someone the other day who knows his stuff, and he said he doesn't see any way Iowa avoids becoming a 3-district state in the next census. I hope that doesn't happen. But we have to figure out a way to revitalize rural Iowa, and this could be one of the pieces to that puzzle. And so there are several other things to do that. But if you've lived in Iowa 10 years, you're going to stay here 10 years in advance, and then your family might stay around you. This thing could probably pay for itself by the people that stayed here and spend money on sales tax and things like that. So that's one of the plans that I'm looking into, and there's several ways to do that. But we have to be very careful on how we structure this. I think a consumption tax is possible, but it's problematic. If we have a consumption tax, it's going to have to be collected and centralized by the state. Otherwise, some counties will get all the sales tax and others will get none. And so we have to really research this thing out and take it slow and make sure we do it right. But I do believe we can give seniors the primary residence tax-free. I think that's a real goal that we can work toward.
Okay, that was the first 4 questions. Now we'll start asking questions. These aren't specific to a candidate. They're basically, I'm just going to ask them in order, and we drew randomly, so they'll fall where they fall. And everyone will just answer one question, and we'll move on to the next question. Good news and bad news. That'll be you.
Okay.
Yep.
It's all good news.
The bad news, Iowa, is that Iowa faces a projected roughly $1 billion budget shortfall for fiscal year 2026. The good news is that the state has nearly $7 billion in reserves, so we can easily cover it. Still, $1 billion budget shortfall is a loaded term, one the Democrats will likely use relentlessly to stir fear and score political points. If elected, how you respond to the narrative, and what's your strategy for maintaining fiscal stability?
So in our budget meetings, in our caucus meetings, when we talk about the budget in our internal caucus, we go over numbers. I don't know what they do in the Senate, but in the House, we go over the numbers pretty closely. And I can tell you that I ask among the most questions, like, what is this projection, this 10-year projection? What does that look like? What does this mean? What happens when Medicare changes and this happens and that happens? And so I think the biggest issue that the registered won't put out is that we've seen all these projections. We know the years that have the dips and the years that don't have the dips. And so I think the best way to put this is remind people that when the Democrats, who apparently now are budget experts now, when they last held the reins at the State House, we were $600 million, almost $700 million in the hole. And it took us several years to get out because the way Republicans budget is we don't use one-time funding, one-time income for ongoing revenue. We just the simple things that most of us try to do at our homes, right? And every year we have grown from $300 million to $600 million to 1.2 to 1.8 billion. Last year we had almost $2 billion surplus. That's in addition to filling up the rainy day fund, which is close to $1 billion, and then adding, you would probably know exactly, but close to $6 billion in the taxpayer relief fund. And so when these dips come that were planned, that were looked at, we've looked at these since the time I got there. We knew they were coming, and it's a temporary dip. This is all part of the plan, and so I would trust the Republicans to continue to advance our state. Let me just say one more thing on that. Our governor, with the help of the legislature, has been named the most fiscal governor and government for the last 3 years. It's a three-peat. It's never been done before by the Cato Institute. And I would trust our judgment a whole lot better than the Des Moines Register and Rob Sand.
All right, well, the most important thing I think that we have to
Brad, so these will be, on this round of questions, you just answer one.
Oh, okay.
And then it'll be, so you get a different one.
Okay.
Okay, different question, okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Education, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, to what level do you support Iowa's Students First Act, also known as school choice, that allows any in-state K through 12 student to use his or her allotment of state education funding to go toward tuition at a private school? And more importantly, is there any way to expand that, or how would you look to expand it if you would?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, I support it on a 10 level. I believe money should follow the student. That money belongs to the taxpayer. It does not belong to the schools. And yet the liberals and the people that hate this educational savings account, they somehow think that's our money and you shouldn't be able to give it to people. It's not. It belongs to the people. And here's the thing about education. This works in business, education, or anything. When you have a monopoly and there's no competition in an area or an industry, whether it's education or whatever, the quality always goes down and the price always goes up. But when you have competition, the quality always goes up and the price goes down. So coupled with auditing and lots of other looking into the overspending and the places where things can be cut, it's very important. You know, the public school system, I'm supporting the public school system. I want us to have a very good public school system. I remember when Iowa was #1 in the nation, and we need to get back to that. And there's several reasons for that. But one of the things is to give it competition so that they say, we better do a better job or we're going to lose students. You know, that works. That's just a reality. So we need to do that. And there's several other reasons that education has gone downhill. You know, Common Core came in, that destroyed our education. We took God out in the 60s, you know, that destroyed education. I mean, the test scores from then have just gone down exponentially and ever since it. So I believe we can expand this a little bit. I think there's a way to do it for those that want it. I remember asking Governor Reynolds if this, when we were discussing this whole issue, if it went to homeschoolers. It does not. Now I know some homeschoolers don't want state money. They're concerned about having state control, and I get that. But I believe the money should follow the student. And of course, if you understand the educational savings account system, all of the money doesn't follow the student. So the public schools are getting a really good deal. They're getting a significant chunk of the money and not having to do anything with the student. So I don't know what they're complaining about. So really, it's a good deal for public schools. So these are some things we can do. I think we can expand it, and but I know this is a hot issue with a lot of people, but that's where I stand on it.
And the next one. This is a three-part toughie.
He's a lawyer.
1, can a boy become a girl?
No.
2, is gender subjective?
No.
3, what now on this issue? We've done a lot. What more can we do? And what are your thoughts on that?
So no. And here's what's crazy is a decade ago, who would have thought that we have to say boys can't play girl sports? Or that a boy can't go into the girls' bathroom? Or that a 14-year-old girl shouldn't be allowed to cut off her private parts? I don't think anyone contemplated that 10 years ago. So I don't know what's next. I didn't know that I would get elected to defend common sense on a daily basis in the Iowa legislature, but it feels like that's what we've been doing. And so what we have to keep doing is making sure that we are championing to protect boys and girls and common sense at the Iowa legislature. And to me, that makes, that's just common sense as we all sit here. I do want to add one thing about Eddie's question, and it's important because we know that the media has picked up on it. House Democrats, Senate Democrats, they've all talked about this budget issue. Who here has a savings account? Right? Everybody raises their hand. Who has a business? A lot of people raise their hands. When you're in that business or you're in your family and you're planning for a big expenditure, or you know that maybe tough times in business might be coming because of headwinds or expansion or whatever it might be, do you save up a little money? Do you put some of that money aside so you can plan for that expenditure, plan for maybe the tough times that are coming? Of course you do. These aren't tough times we're facing. We cut income taxes for every single person in the state, and this isn't the youngest room I've ever seen. So some of you folks with the grayer hair than I've got, we eliminated your state income tax on retirement income. This isn't a surprise. We knew it was coming, and it's because we think your dollar deserves to be in your pocket more than it needs to be at the state. And why? Because we've consistently spent less than we've taken in. In the early 1990s, maybe Representative Garman might remember this, there was a law passed that is the 99% expenditure limitation. It's the law that says how Iowa spends money and spending less than they take in. Well, for every year I've been in the legislature, we've spent around 90% according to that law. We put the rest in savings so we could cut your taxes, and now is that time where it's coming true. It is not unplanned for. The economy is good. We need to keep pushing, and to accept their narrative on a budget crisis is malarkey, to steal a term. We have to keep pushing forward, and all we did was the common sense idea of businesses and families that we saved for exactly what we're going through.
Drugs.
What about them?
How do you feel about legalizing recreational non-medical marijuana?
I'm sorry? I think that's a no. Can you say the question again?
Yeah. How do you feel about legalizing recreational non-medical usage marijuana in Iowa?
Can I get another minute? I mean,
go ahead.
No was the answer.
Use your
so
time
can I
as
mean, that one's easy. I think all you have to do is look at what happened to the states that did legalize it. Do you really want to turn into Illinois? Do you really want to turn into Minneapolis? Do you really want to turn into Colorado? Okay, I think you kind of echoed my points on that. Boy, can I get an easier question? Can I get two? I didn't spend a minute.
Sure. Yes. House is burning down. This is
but I do think no.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll ask you a softball. Your house is burning down. You can take all people are safe. All pets are safe. You can take one object and save it. What would it be?
Besides my MacBook, I mean, I have like about, and I'm sure you guys have the same thing. I have probably like 17 Bibles. And, you know, each one of them has like, you know where the study marks are on that Bible, and you know where the study marks are on that Bible. And I'd have a hard time because I just want to just grab them all. Yeah, they're valuable.
Me too. Okay. Protecting kids from online porn. Kids and hardcore porn. These are two things that definitely need to be kept separate. I think most reasonable people can agree on that. The question is how. Reasonable but real age verification methods for people attempting to access online porn. Is that a good idea, a bad idea? How do we go about doing it or not doing it?
Well, we can certainly make legislation to require age verification. We should do it, but I think it would be a good idea just to get rid of it altogether in many of the easy access points that we have it in. I mean, this is a plague upon our culture, and it plays into human trafficking. We can't treat this like it's just some simple little thing that we deal with and tolerate here and there. But this is the gateway to human trafficking. In Iowa, we've got the third. I think some people say we're third in the nation per capita for human trafficking. I talked to somebody the other day, said they know of multi-million-dollar houses, several of them in the area, that actually have cages in the basement with girls in them. And people come in and look at a video screen, pick the one they want. This is happening in our community, folks. And we don't like talking about it. And porn is the gateway to that. And so, we need to see it for what it is. It's a poison to our culture. And so, I don't know where we're at as a culture as far as being able to pass legislation on that. It's just like the marijuana thing. Marijuana is a gateway drug. I mean, and now the marijuana they're growing has much higher levels of THC. And so we let CBD in, and then we had the situation when I was in the legislature where we're going to allow THC in those drinks. And it was either allow it to be at any level or vote it down to 3%. It was the hardest vote I ever took because I hated what I saw happening. I saw the camel under the nose of the tent. So we got to stop this wherever we can. We need to get this stuff out of our libraries. Our schools shouldn't have anything to do with this stuff. This is unthinkable that these things are in our school libraries. We have to get rid of it. And we have to stop being afraid of those people that scream book burners, and all that sort of thing. George Orwell said this. He said, "In a world filled with lies and deceit, speaking the truth is a revolutionary act." And one of the things that I want to do as governor and even during the campaign is to stir up people to become an army of truth tellers who are no longer afraid, no longer intimidated about being canceled or anything like that from these people. They've had the narrative long enough. It's time for us to take the narrative back, and this is one of the areas.
Okay, cancer rates in Iowa. Iowa's overall cancer incidence rate, if you believe the statistics, is rising while the overall U.S. rate is declining. Only 6 states have rising incidence rates, and we're one of them. That's according to the Iowa Cancer Registry report. And the governor mentioned it in her State of the State address to open up the legislature. Do you have thoughts on what we can do to correct this situation and keep Iowans healthy?
Well, I think we're all alarmed, and show of hands, who's been touched by somebody in your family or a loved one who's had cancer? And if you do that in any state in the nation, it's the same amount of hands. And there is no amount of acceptable cancer rates. And different cancers have different causes. Cigarettes cause lung cancer. I think that's pretty commonly known. What we have to do is we've got to start taking steps that are evidence-based, science-based, and that make sense for us to be putting in place to protect Iowans. But what I also believe is that, government is not going to be, government is reactive, and it's going to have a tough time being ahead of that game. So what we have to do is listen to the people, and we've got to make sure that people are making those right choices. Secretary Kennedy at the federal level has this initiative to make America healthy again. And I think that you look at that, and it's looking at, again, common sense, as we've all known, but eating real food, eating whole food, making sure that the ingredients in those food are real things. And that's where I think, again, as we look at it and look at Iowa agriculture, we have a real opportunity. Because today, as I mentioned earlier, for the first time in my life, anyone's life, Brazil is going to produce more corn and more beans than the United States of America. We have to look for new opportunities for Iowa agriculture to be productive and to be food for Americans. Because if we do that, that's going to be a win for our communities. It's going to be a win for health, and it's something that can be sustainable for the long term.
Okay, two-parter. Have you ever allowed the misplacement of $27 million before?
That would be a no.
What will you do? What can be done about the $27 million of Iowa taxpayer dollars that the state inexplicably misplaced on the watch of State Auditor Rob Sand?
Well, the first thing, since he's not going to be fired, let's make sure he doesn't get elected as the next governor. That's the first thing. And I think the thing with Rob Sand is he's been really unchallenged because there's nobody on the left who's really taken him on. I mean, in his head, he's already run in the general election. And you have to have someone who just calls out his you know what and calls it for what it is. Let me just say a few things. You know, he talks about half of his shtick is that, you know, I just want to love everybody. I just want to be the governor for all Iowans and, you know, Republicans, Democrats, you know, who cares? You know, we're all people. Well, let me just tell you a couple things about Rob Sand. First of all, he says that these Republicans won't let me do my job. First of all, we had to pass a law so he could do his job. He's not an auditor. He didn't know what he was doing. We literally had to pass a law to give him permission to do all the checks and balances. The second thing that is that many of you guys don't know, and I guarantee you, no offense to the media back there, but I'm pretty sure this wasn't reported. He says, you know, the legislature doesn't let me really do my job because they're just, you know, I'm the only Democrat elected across the state, and they just kind of want to hinder me and just keep me down, right? How many of you know that he requested and was denied and then demanded all of your Social Security numbers regarding your health, regarding your COVID shots, whether you got your COVID Test Iowa? How many of you remember Test Iowa? All those set up pop-up shops, effectively, for testing you for COVID. Rob Sand demanded all of that. Like, I need to know. I'm the auditor. That's Rob Sand. And the Health and Human Services Department says, nope, we will give you all that you need. Now, keep in mind, this is not an audit. This is an investigation. This is a witch hunt. Not arguing with you, sir. How many of you even heard of this witch hunt? It's not reported, is it? Okay, the auditor has heard of this. The real auditor has heard of this. The Department of Health and Human Services says, no, Mr. Auditor, we can give you information as long as it's redacted. We're not going to give up all this information. And I have the letter in my desk where he responded back to even that and says, I, the auditor, demand all of your information, your Social Security numbers, whether or not you participated in Test Iowa. For what reason do you think the auditor needs your health information? None. Okay? And then he decided to take that fight to the Iowa Supreme Court. How many of you have even heard of this? Yeah, that's right. And I believe one of the Supreme Court justices called it investigatory. It's like there's a difference between an audit and an investigation. If you're in a trial and you're in discovery, that's it. Give me all the information related to this case. An audit, none of you guys participate. There's no reason he needs to have your information for anybody's audit. And so we passed a law that restricted him and made it seem, and he actually gave me a call. Let me just say this. He actually gave me a call and said, Representative Andrews, I support, I hope you don't support this bill. And I said, well, I haven't seen it yet. Let me check it out. And I said, if this is I don't like Rob Sand bill, I won't have a part of it. But if it's got merit, I will boldly support this. And I did, because I saw the absolute witch hunt and the seeking of information that he had no business doing, and we limited him to actually conducting real audits and starting the audits in the way that the Audit Society requires. So I can just go on and on and on, but I got to tell you, that's one reason why we don't need somebody who's in the audit office for politics. And just, we need a real auditor in the auditor's office and not Rob Sand.
What role would God play in your administration, and what do you say to people that there should be this separation of church and state and whatnot?
Okay, good one. Well, first, I just want to go back to the other question real briefly. Did you know, regarding human trafficking, do you know how many agents we have in Iowa that oversees gaming to make sure casino gaming is done properly? We have 65 agents. Do you know how many agents we have in Iowa to root out human trafficking? 2. And that's just since last December. So folks, when I'm governor, we're going to go after human trafficking. And when there's one person being trafficked, that's not too much. But separation of church and state, good issue. You know, they put the satanic altar in the Capitol, remember that? Well, I was the lead voice fighting against that. I told Governor Reynolds, I don't blame you for that. It's not your fault. I mean, this is the decades of misinterpretation of the First Amendment. First Amendment was never designed to keep Christians and Christian principles out of government. It was designed to keep the state out of the church. And so we need to reinterpret that and put it back in its proper perspective. But here's the thing, and I also filed a bill to ban satanic altars or satanic displays from all public buildings and properties. And of course, I got pushed back. I talked to all the big shots about it. Couldn't get a whole lot of support for it, so I got some support for it, thankfully. But here's the thing. Somebody's values will shape public policy, period. If they tell you to be neutral, don't buy that. It's a myth. Neutrality doesn't exist. That's just code language for you Christians. Sit down and shut up while we advance our value system. And that's what that's code for. We have to stop being afraid to declare that Jesus Christ is Lord. And that's what this nation was founded on. If you go back and you find the history, and that's part of what I'm getting at when I say I want to restore the foundations of freedom. That's what this nation was founded on. It didn't used to feel weird to say that, but now we've let it go so long that now it feels weird to say that. Well, back to what Mike Huckabee said, we just need to say it out loud. You know, and we need to develop our talking points. And, you know, I don't want to force anybody to be a Christian. If we ever forced anybody to be a Christian, it wouldn't be Christianity anymore. But that doesn't mean I have to sit down and shut up. That doesn't mean my values shouldn't shape public policy. Of course, somebody's values will. And so we need to get this down into our hearts and become that army of truth tellers. And I'm believing God for another great awakening. This nation was founded on the heels of the Great Awakening. And the pulpits of America are the ones that wrote our Constitution. They're the ones that shaped the thinking of our founding fathers. Because it was a 40, 50-year period of the Great Awakening and a great revival. And we've had other great revivals in this nation since that have changed the moral climate and changed everything. And folks, we're on the verge of another one. If you've been following, Charlie Kirk, he's got thousands of kids coming to his meetings, and he talks the gospel, he talks Jesus Christ on college campuses. there's something good coming around the corner. And so let's don't get left behind, folks, because that's my position on separation of church and state and God and government, because I believe God and Christian principles, Judeo-Christian principles, however you want to describe it, that's what shaped this nation. That's how we're going to, and this is the most unique nation that's ever been founded on the face of the earth. Our entire Constitution is based on Isaiah 33:22. Well, the first three articles, actually. Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Isaiah 33:22 says, the Lord is our judge, our lawgiver, and our king. So that's the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch right there. You know, so you can't deny this stuff. Now, people, they won't teach it in schools. They used to, but we need to start again. So those are the things I'm going to push for. And, but the most important thing in getting that done is going to be educating the people. And so we need a lot of effort, and government is by the people, folks. And let me just say this one more thing. Thomas Jefferson said this. He said, "I know of no safe depositor of the ultimate powers of a society but the people themselves. If we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. And this is the true correction of abuses of constitutional power." Notice what he said here. It's in the people. We inform and educate the people. Politicians usually think another bill, another law is going to fix things. And even though we believe in smaller government, we keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not going to get smaller until we educate people and teach people how to be self-governing by obeying the law from within their hearts. And so that's where we really need to put a focus on. We need to incentivize that however we can. But mainly, it's all of us as a people coming together and joining together and say, we're going to stand up for what's right in this nation. We're going to reclaim Iowa from this, and we're going to reclaim our nation from this.
Okay, pretend you're wearing 2020 hindsight goggles. Where do you differ from Governor Reynolds in the past several years? What would you have done differently, if anything, and what would you do differently during the last several years,
Regarding,
if anything?
so
Yeah,
COVID, I mean,
maybe.
listen, first of all, in 2020 and during COVID, I think the toughest job in America was being the governor of a state, right? Because the federal government said this is going to be province of governors. That's the way the government, federal government, and the way the Constitution delegates powers, you know. And so Governor Reynolds had a tough job and made the best decisions, and we were one of the most open states, the most open state in the country during that time with the information we had at the time. Now, I'll tell you this. We're starting to learn a heck of a lot of truth about everything from masks working, which they don't, about a non-vaccine that got labeled a vaccine that was forced on people that didn't work, and maybe worse, quite frankly, right? Maybe did harm to folks. And we had businesses that were closed with the best of intentions, the best information at the time, and we became the most open state with schools and taking masks off of kids and everything we did. But, you know, businesses that were closed that, you know, how many people know of a restaurant that went out of business in their town, right? I mean, that's unbelievable. And that was government making a decision with the best information we had at the time, but that put businesses out, that put employees that work there out. You know, it was harmful. And so hindsight's 2020, and there is no going back. And I think Governor Reynolds did a fantastic job during that time. But as you sit here and look at it, you know, there's a lot of things in life I think we all wish we had hindsight in 2020 for. But we would have done things differently, and I think we all recognize kind of what the facts have played out as time has given us. And I think Governor Reynolds did the best she had with the best information at the time, and really brought us to be one of the most free and open states in the country as soon as she could. So, but hindsight being 2020, we would have done that. I think everybody would have done that a heck of a lot differently.
Homeschool. Many Iowa homeschool families pay property taxes that support public schools they don't utilize, while also shouldering the full cost of their children's education, often on a single income. What policies, if any, would you support to reduce the financial burden on homeschool families? How can we reduce the squeeze?
tax credits. So I wrote a bill, and I've actually talked to a number of homeschool people to expand our ESAs, our educational savings accounts, to homeschoolers. When I first presented that idea and began discussing the idea, I think most of you guys know there's the IPI, independent, and the CPI. And while some of the people had welcomed this, others are like, absolutely not, Eddie. I don't want to touch government money. That's why my kids are homeschooled, right? And so we paused on that and reflected and listened to them. And most of them would be fine with tax credits rather than going through the ESA program. I will be looking at that, reviewing that with them, with their support before we move that forward. Because if you understand the reason why many people are homeschooled, literally getting government money is anathema to them. Okay, I know these two. You are 100% right. And yes, and we don't even say, they won't even call them public schools, it's government schools. Absolutely. So here's the thing. Most people are okay with the tax credit because it does cost some money and it would be optional. And I think those are the lines that I am along. And since my colleagues have done this, if I could just respond back to another the previous question. Many of you guys don't know, but the reason we were as open as, or one of the reasons we were as open during COVID as we were, it was due in large part to conservatives in the Iowa House who met, and I'll just tell the short version of this, who met Governor Reynolds and said, no offense, Governor, but if we don't open up our businesses, we're holding a press conference tomorrow about this. And we did that in love, but we did it with passion and sincerity. And I think the primary meeting took like 2 hours of back and forth. And when that was done, the next day, everything opened back up. And so I must acknowledge that's not necessarily widespread publicly, but just like the senators, the 12 senators who stood up for the pipeline earlier this year, sometimes it takes a group of strong conservative people with a backbone just to say, you know what, love you, but if this doesn't happen, we're going to make sure that we're going to hold a press conference talking about Governor Powers. And so that's something that maybe you guys don't know, but I was proud to participate in that, and I do it again.
This one, it's been touched on a little bit already, but I think it's worth delving deeper. Ending mail-order abortion pills. The dangers of chemical abortion drugs have been vastly understated according to recent scientific data. Add to that, unscrupulous out-of-state internet pill pushers offer easy access to these chemical abortion pills via the mail. In your view, what can Iowa do, what should Iowa do, if anything, to stop this egregious practice?
Well, that's something where you do need a legislative restriction to it. We need to stop these pills from coming in. These pills, not only do they end a life of an unborn child, but they're very dangerous to the young lady that takes them, and they're being done without any government oversight. And over-the-counter over-the-counter birth control is also a big problem and can be used in that way in some cases. And so this is something that the legislature and the governor needs to do, is take a stand against this and begin speaking about it. You know, there are certain things, it seems like in our government, that certain things are just taboo and you won't talk about them. But if we're going to be pro-life, we have to talk about this. We have to speak up make sure it's being prohibited. And not only that, the remains of children are going down toilets and into sewer systems. I mean, just think about that. And not only that, but the chemicals that caused it are going down those systems and going into our rivers and streams. I read an article just the other day that talked about how we've got abortion in our drinking water. You know, and so, I mean, there are a lot of things here that need to be researched. And these things need to be verified, and we need some independent research groups and scientists to study these things and give us the facts. And that would be one of the first things I would do is get the facts. You know, I believe in facts. I believe in being serious. You know, this is not hyperbole. This is serious business that we're doing here. And so we have to get the facts on these issues. And so that would be my position on that. We have to take action on it because, like I said earlier, heartbeat bill was good, but there's more work to do. Don't kid yourself.
Last question. And then we'll do one more question, and we'll do just like a 2-minute summation from each candidate, and then we'll wind it down. If Iowa was a Fortune 500 company, and if you were applying for the job of state governor, how would your resume stand out to the hiring team, and how would it stack up to whoever might go forward in the general?
Is this for everyone?
No, just for yep. Go ahead.
Oh, it's my question? Oh, great. You know, I think we have a ton of the great state of Iowa has, you know, we've got candidates here, we've got other candidates in the Republican Party who are looking at this. And the contrast really is about not where we've been, not what we've done, but where are we going to go? Where's our state going to go? Where's the vision that we have for what we want Iowa to be now and into the future? And I'm somebody who grew up in Iowa. Grew up in Davenport, Iowa, went to the University of Iowa, Drake University, and made my life in Iowa. And I look at the opportunity that our state has with manufacturing jobs coming back, with 1 million people who still live in rural Iowa, with understanding that we can do more to cut the cost of living, that we can compete. And as a state, by the way, we are growing. Minnesota lost population. Illinois lost population. Iowa gained population. We have a base to build on. But the fact of the matter is, the nation is changing. Jobs are coming back. And I am somebody who has the vision to build on the greatness of Iowa today, to put Iowa first with the ideals that we have that are conservative, that are focused on jobs, agriculture, safe communities, and families. And if we can do that, and we can stand together, we can beat somebody who wants to raise your taxes, who wants to give your families less freedom to make the choices that are yours to make, and have a bigger government that he thinks is a better government. The choice is going to be clear in November of 2026. We need a candidate who can communicate that message every single day, who can take the fight to Rob Sand every single day, who can tell the truth about Rob Sand and what he's done every single day, connect with voters, and win. I've won those tough races, and that's why I can win this race.
Thank you to our candidates for all answering those questions. Now we'll just do a 2-minute, say whatever you want type of summation and close. Eddie, you're first up.
So thank you guys for being here. First of all, I know it took a lot out of your schedule. And I truly believe one of us is going to be governor. I think it's going to be me. But let's make sure that one of us is governor. On June 2nd, at 9:01 p.m., when we find out the results, I think all of us need to be all in on the nominee. 100%. Everyone in this audience, everyone up here, including you, Jeff.
You can count on me.
Because what's at stake is bigger than what many of you know. Because we have a supermajority in the Iowa House, and because we have a supermajority in the Iowa Senate, you guys have been shielded from some of the garbage. Oh my goodness. Things that are said on the House floor that you would not believe. And if I'll tell you a quick story. I'm sorry. I was sitting there with Brooke Bowden, and one of the Democrats said something, and she refused to define a woman. And I can't even describe how she described women. And the guttural reaction from Brooke Bowden, it just blurted out because it was just so absurd how they defined a woman. And we cannot have someone who agrees with that kind of garbage in Terrace Hill. We must maintain a conservative, God-fearing man or woman. Apparently there's women in the race right now, but in Terrace Hill. As your next governor, I'd like to echo some of my comments, the comments of my colleagues. I've been working on human trafficking for about the last 4 years. And like a pastor said, once you see human trafficking, you cannot unsee it. And it's everywhere. And in my administration, we will destroy the entire human trafficking industry in Iowa from top to bottom, from Mississippi to the Missouri. I was part of the team that went down to the border in the previous administration and saw exactly how it started and how the parts that aren't, even to this day, that are not discussed, and not just the rape trees, but the death, literally the death. Books and folders of death of people who violated, who they just got tired of them and said, we're just going to kill you. Literally books and folders. The other thing that I would like to do is education. We need to make education, as my colleague said, back to number one. When I was a kid, we were all number one. We were number 3, number 5 in a bad year. And because of Common Core, because of No Child Left Behind, we now have more administrators than teachers. It's completely flipped. And while, yes, we want to strengthen every form of education, from homeschool to public charter to parochial to traditional public school, we have to educate all of our kids in the way that the parents say is the best way to educate their own children. They know best. We need to make sure that we have property rights that are respected. In Iowa, we cannot have eminent domain abuse running over farmers and landowners in any case. And lastly, what's been on my heart is the reason why I ran in the first place. It's not the rah, 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 but mental health. We need to get back to a strong community and build up our fathers, build up our families, and strengthen, because if you have a strong family, you have a strong community, and if you have a strong community, you have a strong state. With the vision that I have, I would like to take Iowa to new heights. The last thing I'm going to say, and I will never say this again, because I said that I wanted to be the best governor ever, and someone mentioned to me exactly who I was sitting next to, and I'm like, oh, I forgot I was sitting right next to Governor Sarah Huckabee and Governor Kim Reynolds, and I said, I meant one of the best governors ever. So I appreciate your time, and I just want to say, please look me up. If you have any questions, I will be around. God bless you. Thank you so much.
I mentioned in my opening comments I had 4 promises I'd like to give you, so now's my chance to tell you my 4 promises. The first promise is that if I make a mistake, I'm going to admit it. Have you ever noticed how when people get elected, they become infallible? At least it seems that way. You know, never. How wouldn't it be so refreshing to hear a politician say, you know, we did the best we could, but you know, that didn't work out so well, so that's not going to happen again. You know, I appreciate the fact that we didn't understand what was happening during COVID. But since then, I've heard, oh, we kept Iowa open. And I'm like, no, we didn't. No, we didn't. You know, and the standard is not to be better than the next state. The standard is to obey constitutional principles and not violate our freedoms. That's the standard. And it's the first time in history we quarantined healthy people instead of sick people. You know, I mean, we should have picked it. It didn't take long to figure out what was going on, and we should have stopped that really quick. And I'm just telling you, that's not going to happen again, and at least not like that. But if I make a mistake, I'm going to admit. I told you I talked to Mike Huckabee, and in that same conversation, he said, you know, the most dangerous person in the room, and he's had a little experience being governor, Mike Huckabee has. He said the most dangerous person in the room is the guy that doesn't know that he doesn't know. And so you get somebody that thinks they got to have the answer for everything, that's dangerous. And so nobody knows everything, but we can find people that do, and we'll search out the right people. And so if I make a mistake, I'm going to admit it. I think that's hugely important, you know, because, you know, that's the thing I hate about campaigning is self-promotion. I don't like to promote myself. It just feels like pride. But, you know, you have to get out there and you have to talk about your values. But I'm serious about this. The second promise is that and this is one I absolutely promise I will keep. I know I can keep this promise, and that is that I won't please everyone. And I usually get a chuckle out of that, but there's a serious side to it as well, because if that isn't solid in your heart, you go into office and you start trying to please everyone, that's a lack of backbone, and that's a recipe for compromise right off the bat. So I know up front, not going to please everyone, going to have a backbone, going to stand for truth. That's that. That's the way I've been living my life ever since I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. And the same night I met Carol is the night I surrendered my life to Jesus. And he's been working that principle into me for 50 years. The third promise is I won't be bought. Government is not for sale, period. And I think I mentioned earlier that a lot of money changes hands, campaign donations and what have you, and probably done in a legal manner. But it seems to me that it influences decisions against what's right. And I'm not going to do that. I'm consider myself, I don't have a lot of donations from the establishment. So if any of you want to donate, feel free. But I'm just telling you, I won't be owned by anyone. I don't care how big the donation is. It's not going to own me. And that's my promise. And that's, you can bank on that one. And so I won't be bought. Government's not for sale. And the last promise is this: I'm going to seek Almighty God with all my heart through prayer and wise counselors to make the right decisions, because sometimes it's not clear what the right decisions are. Some of these bills get pretty twisted and convoluted, and these issues get complex sometimes. Some of them are clear and easy, but sometimes they're not. And so I'm going to seek God with all my heart. You know, and closing with a word from the Word about God. You know, the Iowa Constitution says that we owe gratitude to the Supreme Being. The preamble to the Iowa Constitution says we owe gratitude to the Supreme Being for the blessings that we have hitherto enjoyed. And we depend, and it goes on and says, and we feel dependence upon Him for our future blessings. Folks, we can't, it's right in our Iowa Constitution, it's in our Declaration of Independence. We can't stick our finger in God's eye and think we're going to be blessed in this state. So I'll end with that, and I hope that these principles that I'm talking about will just really simmer and soak into our hearts. I want to encourage you to pick up the little free booklet back there if there's any left, so just help you understand a little bit more about how I think on several key issues.
You know, running for legislature in a tough seat, you knock a lot of doors. Eddie and I both know that, you know, those are lives. And it's a great thing. You get to meet fascinating people who tell you all about what they think. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's tough. And there's some that really stick out to you, you know, some that you just remember forever, like meeting a family, a mom who lived in Ankeny, and she got to send her kids to St. Luke the Evangelist Catholic School because of school choice. It wasn't economically going to be available for them. I came from Davenport Central. You know, I grew up with kids who couldn't get out of Davenport Central because of the zip code dooming their educational choice and lack of choice. And so hear a mom say, you took action, and these kids, my kids, have an opportunity they wouldn't have had otherwise, meant something. Or knocked on a door of an elderly family after we eliminated the state income tax on retirement income. And this woman was in tears because she said, Mike, with the money we're saving, we can stay in this house. We don't have to move. And I think what you hear from three people up here, and I think from my colleagues and Senator Alon's in the back, when you run for legislature, you run for public service, these are people who do it not because they want to be somebody, because they want to do something. I look at the choice we're going to have in 2026. Corn's trading at $3.70 a bushel. It costs $4.90 to produce it. Up until a couple of years ago, John Deere was laying people off in this state. We have a million people that live in rural Iowa across our state. We have a path to choose. We have a choice to make. Rob Sand wants to raise your taxes. We have three people up here who say you should have lower taxes. Fundamentally, because we don't believe government is the solution. We believe government is there for the people, not and by the people, but not to dictate to the people. The choice that we have coming up, it is the most important election, and this is hyperbole, but it's going to be the toughest election in 15 years. We've got to look around the room and decide what vision and what path do we want for the state. How do we see this growth of our state in jobs? How do we protect agriculture? How do we protect rural communities? How do we keep putting families first? How do we make sure that we protect common sense so we don't have to go protect bathrooms again with a new governor? Those are the kind of choices we have coming up. But I can tell you this, the reason I'm exploring to run for governor, the reason I'm here tonight, because I want to be a guy that represents you, that represents this state, not because he wants to be somebody, because I want to do something. You can tell I got some fight in my heart, and I will bring that fight to that campaign every single day. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here.
Let's hear it for these three, all three of them. Stand up. Thanks for being here. Thanks for answering the questions.